I'll dedicate my learning this evening to the memory of the 6 million, because Yom HaShoah is this coming Sunday or Wednesday evening, or as a teacher I used to work with, called it the 6,000,001, to remind us that each person was an individual. So let's do our blessing for Torah study together, because Hitler wanted to make sure we couldn't, and here we still are. So it ends with La'asok b'divrei Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech asher kivshanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord of God, rule of the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves in the words of Torah. And because it is after the second day of Passover, we're going to count the Omer too. So, as a reminder, an Omer is a bundle of wheat for all of you who are not farmers. And so, according to Leviticus, you're supposed to count the days from what the rabbis interpreted to be the second day of Passover, all the way until Shavuot, 7 weeks. And on Shavuot, you're supposed to bring an Omer of your barley harvest. So we count the days, and there's a blessing for it. It is similar to the one we just said, except it ends with Al Sfirat HaOmer. And then we announce what the day is, with the number of weeks. Well, that we say today is the blank day, which is blank weeks and blank days of the Omer. So for those of you who are into math, this is a good time of year for you, particularly if you like long division with remainers and such. So I'll try to remember to count this every week together with all of you. And if you're used to it, great. And if you're not used to it, hopefully by the time we get through 7 weeks, you'll be very familiar with the whole thing. So give it your best shot. We'll start with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ivanu al sfirat ha'omer. Praise to you, Lord of God, rule of the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and commanded us on the counting of the Omer. So I'm going to use my handy dandy Omer counter. You don't actually need one of these, but it does make it a little easier if you have one. You could also use a plain calendar or whatever. So this tells me that last night we had 1 week and 1 day. I always have to do the math in my head. So that was 8 days last night. And you can figure out what it is tonight. So Hayom Tish'a Yamim Shehem Shavua Echad Shnei Yamim. Today is 9 days, which makes 1 week and 2 days to the Omer. And then I'll move it a little big.
That's nice.
So, with that, let's do some Pirkei Avot. Alrighty. Herb, would you do us the honors of reading what Rabbi Shimon had to say, please?
Shimon said, "Be careful with the reading of Shema and the Amida. And when you pray, do not make your prayer something automatic, but a plea for compassion before God. For it is said, for God is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in kindness, and renouncing punishment. And be not wicked in your own esteem."
Sit here.
Biography. Rabbi Shimon ben Netanyahu lived around the year 100 CE and was married to Rabban Gamliel I's daughter. This makes him about the same age as his teacher, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and older than some of his fellow students. Not much of what he taught is preserved. How are these sayings relevant to our lives today?
Thank you. All right. So, how is this relevant to our life today?
Sometimes, frequently when I'm davening, I feel almost like I'm saying a magic spell, trying to make something happen without any feeling whatsoever. It's like, I wish it's like, but those few times when you actually are into it and you're really feeling something and you're praying at the same time are very, very wonderful. I wish I could make them happen more often.
Mm, yeah.
I don't know how the rabbis were in their time, but here we seem to be, especially during the week, we seem to be rushed to get it all done in a very short period of time. And it's very hard to get that attention much of the time.
Yeah.
That would be nice, thanks.
All right.
So looking for me, I don't know, kind of looking at or just remembering some of the different denominations that we kind of went over, different sects of Judaism over the last few, really months. It seems like some of the more radical or ones that are getting away from some of the, I guess, the more monotony or some of the traditions. I think that's their aim, is to keep it from being something being automatic and to keep it, keep compassion. It might not be for God if it's, if that's the sect, but it might be for them to like keep it fresh. And sometimes it feels like some of the ones that, it's more content over the, I don't know, the meat of the issue. So I think that, I don't know, it just kind of brought back what some of the rabbis or some of the speakers kind of were talking about over the last few weeks or months.
Yeah.
Kind of wondering, the last statement is not to be hard on yourself if you're not able to reach that kavanah, or am I misreading that? Or it's to try your best, but and if you can't feel that compassion, to not to be hard on yourself about it.
I think, Carol, that you're right. One of the nice things about Pirkei Avot is that there tends to be 3 sayings within each Mishnah. And each one can be read on its own and in juxtaposition with the others. And so I think you have a reasonable interpretation of what is be not wicked in your own esteem means in juxtaposition to the others. And that stands alongside reading it on its own. Both coexist together.
Just struck me when we read that last line that it kind of was, don't admonish yourself. God is slow to anger, compassionate, giving. So do your best. But anyway, that's what struck me.
Well,
Nice.
Carol, that also reminds me of like, if anybody's ever tried to meditate or anything, whenever what they say is, if you have like a thought, accept it, acknowledge it, and then let it go type thing. So
Exactly what I was thinking.
What else? How else is this? Are all of these sayings relevant to our lives today?
when I was reading it, and that you shouldn't do the Shema or the Amida and take it automatic, I sort of focused on the word automatic in terms of our life today, that so much before COVID we took for granted and we automatically did and we didn't appreciate, and that maybe today we should be appreciating, if not, just approach life in a different way.
Nice.
Also, you know, I think us doing these Pirkei Avot classes is a great way to make us, you know, not have something be automatic, that makes us think about it and, you know, live, you know, I don't know, just talk the talk, and, you know, like not just, you know, it makes us, you know, think about the holidays whenever we go over that kind of stuff. So I really enjoyed this class. I mean, how does this, you know, come back to today? I'd say Pirkei, these classes every week is, you know, how we're living that.
So when I look at this, there are times where things are kind of automatic, and then there's times where every word seems to be so relevant and so full. And what I'm looking at here is it says, do not make your prayer. It's almost like, is that a purposeful action upon the part of the person?
Does this have anything to do with saying the prayer, if that's the proper word, saying the prayer by rote because you've memorized it, as opposed to actually paying attention to what's on the page in the prayer book?
Yeah, I think that is connected.
And they're the only ones we need to be concerned about is the Shema and the Amida. Everything else is okay.
It's interesting why for the rabbis of the Mishnah, like, those were the most important prayers. And granted, there may not have been that many others by this point.
Oh, the Amida is one that each of us says individually. All the other prayers, basically, we say together. Even though we're all 10 there, 10 or more there, the Amida is still an individual prayer.
And it's also a prayer that's intended to, shall we say, cover a lot of ground.
Yeah. So why the Shema? Shema
Because the
Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one.
I always learned the pledges of allegiance.
Ah,
Funny. That's good, Paul.
Well,
Maybe
all the more reason, David, not to make it something automatic, that it's a foundational prayer, should be said with kavanah, with spirit, with passion, not mechanically.
And morning and night, so we get used to just saying it automatically. And I like what Brenda said, that it's really incumbent upon us to make it more personal.
It's one of those prayers where you can put the emphasis on several different words in the prayer so that you hear it and experience it very differently.
Hmm.
Also, along the lines of what Brenda said, for many people in shul, and I know this because many people are kind of proud when they do this, there's like a race to be done the Amida first.
Yeah, right. Who can sit down?
Instead of pondering and absorbing
Right.
the words of the prayer, they're just in a hurry to get it over with. It pretty much defeats the purpose of the prayer.
Exactly. So I gave up winning the race years ago so I could reflect upon different things. And certain days I feel differently than other days. And then certain things have meaning to me that may not have had meaning on other occasions. Sometimes it has to do with the circumstances in which I find myself. So there's those grains of wisdom or the experience of men, so the people hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, and there was for me some seeds of wisdom there that are very helpful in guiding my my direction today.
Hmm. What do you guys make of and be not wicked in your own esteem? Like, how is that relevant today? Like, just on its own, not necessarily in the context of the other two sayings.
Yeah, well, like what Carol said about not being so hard on yourself. And this last year, I think a lot of people have been hard on themselves.
Well, also that you're worthy maybe of forgiveness and compassion, whether it's from the universal powers of God or if it's just from other people, or and you could also be compassionate to others.
Hmm.
Or also mean, don't think too much of yourself.
Yeah, could go that way too, right?
Could be.
Or ultimately, you're the one that judges yourself. So you'll hold yourself accountable.
And that actually does tie back to the theme of prayer in this set of sayings, because lehit palel is the Hebrew verb for to pray, but it literally is a reflexive verb that means to judge yourself. So when you are praying, you are thinking about how you hold up against both these aspects of your life that you're talking to God about, and also how you stand up to the idea of like the example that God as the ultimate role model is setting, like what we talked about with the Micha prayer, for those of you here that week, about the idea that God, we ask God to redeem others. And so one approach to prayer is to judge yourself. How are you doing in the realm of redeeming others? So judging yourself ties in nicely to this theme as well as just standing on its own.
It seems to me that, and I think this might fit in with what you just said, David, I'm not sure, that Rabbi Shimon is drawing a contrast that I don't know if it's been really focused on in what's been said, between the routine and the appeal, the plea to God, which suggests that, just as you were saying, you can look at how you treat others or how you relate to others. The prayer is saying, or he's saying, I should say, it has to be relational. Now that's really hard for us if we don't just take for granted that there is this relationship. But that's what I think he's saying. You have to make a plea for compassion. That means to someone. And then it can't really be mechanical, because you can't make a plea to your, your Cuisinart. It has to be. It's a relational rather than a. I'm not sure what keva exactly means, but rather than just following a line of routine.
Yeah.
Well, you're just making sounds, as someone said, without even considering what they mean, the significance. If you're doing it automatically, and that's certainly not the purpose.
But I think wasn't it, Charles? Did you say that each time you say something, if you're alive to it, anyhow, you can focus on something different depending on how your day is going, or how you're thinking. It becomes a kind of a meditative thing where you focus on different aspects.
Yeah,
and then
some days certain things stand out more than others. Certain instances. So yes, that's.
When you say these prayers, even though we say the Amida is said personally, we say them together with everyone else attending the service. And the third line again would be to consider yourself important and part of that collective appeal. You can make it personal, but you also need to be part of the group. I think Herb said something about being 10 people there, but you have to consider yourself to be important, to be in part of the collective group of people creating the appeal or pleading for compassion.
Yeah.
Sort of the same of what I said before, but a little different way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yourself as part of the whole and not just alone.
Each of these things in Pirkei Avot is like a many, many, many faceted jewel.
Yes. When I first read them, when I first became aware of them, I thought they're just simple phrases.
Yes.
And then you start to peel the layers away. It's pretty incredible.
We have that. Okay.
So is this describing God as gracious, compassionate, slow to anger, abounding kindness, and renouncing punishment?
Yes.
And I mean, there are definitely examples of him not renouncing punishment or quick to anger, or God well. So I'm curious on.
That's true.
The choice to omit the other characteristics of God described in different parts of the Torah.
I think we pick and choose what parts are aspirational for us, I see here is the question between this from Joel and the last part of this set of sayings, that even though God has moments where God is described as being quick to anger and bringing about punishment, God also has moments where God is slow to anger and renounces punishment, such as in the story of Jonah. And so, just like we have moments where we might see ourselves as the wicked child, nonetheless, we should be not wicked on our own esteem, try to aspire towards our better angels, just like we try to focus on God's better. It's an aspiration. That's a good question.
Well, if you consider what happens in the natural world as manifestations of God, you can see in some parts of the world everything is calm and you have fertile fields and people having a good harvest, and someplace else you have floods and storms. So if that's a manifestation, if you look at it that way, then one is not mutually exclusive of the other. It could have something simultaneous at the same time. Different parts of the world, different people, different for whatever reason. So, is that part of the mystery we're trying to grow closer to and understanding?
Yeah. God is a complicated subject. Some people view God as acting in nature. Some people view God as controlling nature. That was particularly the case in the time of the Bible, when they didn't have other explanations for why there's calm weather sometimes and stormy weather other times. Some people view God as having set up the rules of the game and then sitting back and watching it play out and hearing when humans help each other in response to how the natural world plays out.
Well, does God accept the prayer here in the same way he would accept the prayer in Miramar, for example?
Say more.
Well, our circumstances here are fairly nice, quote unquote. Circumstances over there are very much different. Their prayer might be given much different emotional state, much different meaning. Even if it weren't, if it was the same prayer, how would God look at the two? Something we can't judge.
No.
So I wanted to respond to Justin's point that sometimes God does not display these characteristics, but I think that what may be indicated in this saying in this particular part of Pirkei Avot is that by praying to God, you can evoke these aspects of God. Similar on Yom Kippur, when we say that tefillah is one of the three ways that we can lessen the punishment. So that sincere prayer is a way of engaging with God for his compassion, his graciousness, and his slow to anger and abounding in kindness and so on. I don't know if that helps you any, Justin. It helps me.
I really like that.
It helps me on Yom Kippur too.
With the saying, be careful with the reading of the Shema and Amida, how would that be relevant today? What are there other non-prayer texts where it might be used? Are there other things besides these two prayers in our lives today where a reminder to, quote, be careful with the reading of, so to speak, would be helpful?
Terms and conditions.
Mm-hmm. Good. Other thoughts?
Somebody says something to you.
Could it apply to how you listen also?
That's true.
Like listening to the news?
Yeah.
Particularly sound bites, which are frequently taken out of context.
Hmm.
Social media, really encourages us to look for, the most minimal chunks of content with which to engage. And frequently that diminishes our understanding of complex situations.
Hmm.
I was looking at the Shema again. It really looks like an instruction manual.
Go on.
If you actually read the words, it just goes out, do this, do this, do this, do this, follow through, and then this happens.
Yeah.
And as my mother used to say, when all else fails, follow instruction.
Ah. What would it be like to make your prayer a plea for compassion before God?
I mean, that one you have to admit fault. I mean, if you're asking for compassion, I mean, you're not asking for compassion if you're perfect. So you're admitting fault. But then, like we discussed at the end, it's don't be wicked in your own esteem as well.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily agree with that, Justin.
Okay.
Because I think that it's entirely possible to, like, for example, the prayer for the sick in or the prayer, rather the prayer for healing in the Amida. We're not saying that anybody deserves to be ill, but we're asking God to intercede on behalf of the ill, by appealing to God's compassion. We're not saying that, yes, they're not perfect, but, they still don't deserve to be ill. We're just saying, God, you are a compassionate being. Look at the suffering of these people and, please be moved to heal them. I don't think that necessarily admits any sort of fault on the part of those who are ill.
Perfect. I love that.
Thank you.
I think of a story in the Bible, and I believe it's the mother of Solomon, who is praying at, I believe it's at the temple at the time, and a priest comes up to her, and he thinks that she's a drunk woman.
Oh,
But in fact, she was kind of crying her heart out because she'd been barren. And so the priest said that, he believed her and said, okay, this time next year, you'll be the mother of a child. So, I think, what your feelings are, your deep feelings really make a difference to your ask, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hannah's prayer, which leads to Samuel's birth eventually, is considered the epitome, or like the paradigmatic epitome of how one ought to pray for the rabbis. Even though Eli, the priest at the I don't know exactly what to call it. It was before the temple, but it was after the tabernacle, wherever the ark was at that point, in Shiloh. Even though he thought she was drunk, like the fact that she was speaking, she seemed to be speaking, but no words were coming out. She was clearly very passionate about what she was saying. Like sometimes prayer works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's certainly more likely to if you feel like if you clearly mean what you're saying, if your prayer isn't just something automatic. And sometimes the answer is no.
I think when you pray with kavanah, sometimes you can help yourself. It reaches in and your answer comes in a way of maybe reaching deeper into yourself to find the compassion you need for something or the hope you need for something. You feel a connection and it gives you strength to solve your own problem. Maybe.
God helps those who help themselves.
Right.
Been taught, right?
Right. I guess it's exactly right. So.
There's a funny story about a guy whose house has been flooded, and he's up on a roof, and he's trying to get saved, and the helicopter comes and he says, no, I'm okay, and boat comes, he says, no, I'm okay. And then the guy actually drowns, and he asks God, he says, God, why didn't you help me? He says, well, I sent a helicopter and I sent a boat, and you just, you didn't get it. So
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That's an old story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sums it up.
On a totally different topic, I have frequently been bothered intensely by the, what I see as the false dichotomy of, keva and kavanah, of, the fixed nature of prayer and the intentionality of prayer. And I'm looking at this second section, and I'm wondering if this is kind of the origin of that dichotomy, that it's, the idea that it's an either or, as opposed to that there are two axes along which prayer move. And that, one is not to the exclusion of the other, but rather that they're two dimensions that work in concert together. So I kind of take issue with this second paragraph, but that it's, do not make your prayer something automatic, but a plea for compassion before God. And I'm tempted to look up the Hebrew to see if there's anything there to to my wondering whether this is the the start of that that paradigm of them as of keva and kavanah as being in opposition to one another.
Many years ago, I was told, and I can't remember who told me, that the Amida was written for people who did not know how to pray. They know something about prayer, but that most people who know how to pray don't need it.
Yeah. As my father said a couple weeks ago, originally only the chatimot, the signatures at the very end of each paragraph in the Amida was set, and then everybody just like made up their own paragraphs about that topic sentence, so to speak. And then somebody around 800-ish or so, 900-ish, asked for like the official answer as to what they were supposed to be saying, and Amram Gaon sent the first prayer book as in response, and then everything got set. But for the first 600 years or so, after Rabban Gamliel set the topics of the Amida, you could say what you wanted. It's an interesting question and then at the end, even today, we have the paragraph El Hainatsur, which is the space for putting your own non-fixed prayers. And even though El Hainatsur, that last paragraph before Oseh Shalom, is a set text, in the Talmud, it's just an example among many examples from the rabbis of what their spontaneous prayers were. So circling back to where we began with what people were noticing about some of the different branches of Judaism, like how do you bring the spontaneity back into prayer, or the feel of spontaneity and of personalized saying of personalized saying of your own words and meaning of your own words into a relationship with God and into a time when so many of the time in the day when so many of the words are already set for you. Other thoughts on this, on these texts? All right, seeing none, I'm going to stop the share. Thank you. Thank you for a really interesting discussion this evening.
You, David.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Next week, we will prepare for Yom Ha'atzmaut by diving into the Israeli Declaration of Independence. There's per what it said in this week's text that we looked at, we'll do a careful reading of it and not just read automatically, but really think about what's in there. And then the week after that, we will look at more Pirkei Avot, and we'll get into heresy, or at least heretics. To be fun. And we'll go from there.
So for those of you who are interested, season 3 of Shtisel is back. It started yesterday. Which is a great show.
I went on a binge last week.
Yeah, I almost finished it. I have 1 episode left I'm going to do tonight.
Well, I won't spoil it for you.
No. What?
I will not spoil it for
Okay,
you.
thank you. I did 8. I got 1 left.
About it. They said I should watch it. So they like
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Toda rabah.
Thanks, Dave. Have a good week.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
night,
Have a
Brenda.
good week, everyone.
Right.
Stay well.
Good night.
David, you have a minute?
You do.
I wonder if there are any texts regarding memorial candles. The reason I ask is when we have a yard site, we generally light 1 fresh candle for each person.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to Yisker, I know people who light 1 candle for each person they're commemorating.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people light 1 candle for the entire group of people. And I wonder if there are any texts governing that. It also occurred to me, when you have a death and a burial, you light 1 8-day Shiva candle for the person who died.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens if a man and a woman, for example, or 2 people of the same family died together or died the same day and are buried the same day? You light 1 candle or do you light 2 candles? Are there any texts that cover any of this that you know of? Or is it just whatever custom you're used to?
There may be texts on it. I will look and see. Avot, do you know anything about this?
Yes, I do. Hi, Herb.
Hello.
So, a colleague of mine, Rabbi Stuart Kelman, has written books that, when I was heavily involved with Hever Kadisha, which clergy don't usually get a chance to do, guided us. And I suspect that there may be some things in the back of some of those slender books that he's written that would talk about that. But the other one who wrote a wonderful, very slim little book is Ron Isaacs. Rabbi Ron Isaacs wrote a whole book on bereavement and on customs of burial and mourning. And then, of course, the classic text was written long before David and his siblings were born. Maurice Lamb, the Jewish approach to death and dying. And if you don't mind a super Orthodox approach to things, although not crazy, Hasidic, that would probably have stuff like that. But I would start, of the three, the easiest for you to find should be the Ron Isaacs stuff. You can buy it for, like, I don't know, $6-7 from Berman House. And it's a very slender little book. And the other thing that I can offer, I'm up to here right now between work and trying to be a good host to David's younger brother and sister-in-law. But if you want to send, and David can share my email address, if you want to send me some of those questions when they're gone, if you don't need the answer like this week.
It's more curiosity than anything else. I know I generally like one per person.
I follow the custom for yard sites of lighting one for everybody, because where do you stop? I actually advised one of my own congregants of that. Where do you stop if you start lighting one for, do you only carry it out to the 8 primary relatives, or what about all the other people? Do I light one for my mother-in-law? So just by lighting one, that takes care of everybody. The way I approach it. I also have supposed to spend most of my life living in places where you can't get yard site candles very easily. So I tend to husband them.
In which case you get a lamp. Not, to me, it's not the same thing, but sometimes you have to because candles can't be used.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That's off the top of my head. There are resources. I've got some of the resources in my own library personally, and others you can easily obtain through Amazon or Rosenbaum's, whatever that big Jewish bookstore should have stuff. Some of these things.
So just to make sure I grasp the question, it was for yard site candles and Yosku candles. Do you like one per person or one for everybody? Is that
Yes, basically, yes.
Okay.
And the other thing to do, of course, is, I'm not a rabbi, even though I'm functioning as one for this Reform synagogue. David's not a rabbi. Ask Rabbi Glick, see what he wants to say.
Yeah, I know. It just that occurred to me, and I thought I'd ask as long as we're studying texts.
Yeah, just don't quote me to Rabbi Glick, though, because the best way to piss off a rabbi is to tell him that a cantor said something.
Or to tell him that you asked another rabbi first.
There, at least, it's between rabbis.
Okay.
But Rabbi Glick's a sweetie, so I'm not worried about him in particular. But I can tell you that there are plenty of rabbis who the quickest way to get them ticked off is to hear that a cantor paskined halakha. But I have no choice. This is the third time where I am functioning as a rabbi, and I actually have a pretty good education to back up my words. And I certainly have the library to back up my words.